The sun had barely climbed over the water tower when 11-year-old Marcus Whitfield heard the sound that would change his life forever, the scrape of chains dragging against gravel, and a groan of pain coming from behind the old feed store on the edge of Route 9. He almost ran. Every instinct in his small body told him to turn around, to pretend he hadn't heard anything, to go home and forget the sound of grown men crying out in the dark. But Marcus didn't run. He walked toward the noise, his sneakers crunching over broken glass and rust, until he found them, 4 bikers, leather vests torn, wrists and ankles bound in heavy chains, lying in the dirt behind a chain link fence like they'd been thrown away and forgotten by the world. If this story of courage moves something in you, hit that like button right now. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Share this with someone who still believes in second chances. And subscribe to Whispering Tales Stories, because what happened next proved that sometimes the smallest hands carry the biggest hearts. The bikers were part of the Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club, men who had ridden into town 2 nights before to attend the funeral of their fallen brother, a rider named Samuel Voss who died protecting a stranger from a burning car. What the town didn't know was that a rival club, the Ashfield Reapers, had followed them in, waiting for the moment the wolves were vulnerable, distracted by grief. Under cover of night, 4 members had been ambushed outside their motel, beaten, chained, and dragged behind the abandoned feed store to be left as a warning. Nobody was supposed to find them until it was too late. But Marcus found them. He was just a boy who collected cans on Saturday mornings to help his grandmother pay the light bill, a boy with quiet eyes and a heart too big for his skinny frame. When he saw the men lying there, bloodied, exhausted, one of them barely conscious, his first instinct wasn't fear. It was something older than fear. Something his grandmother had spent his whole life planting in him. The belief that every person, no matter how rough they looked, deserved a chance to be helped. The biggest of the 4 men, a broad-shouldered rider named Tobias Reed, lifted his head and rasped at the boy to run, to get away before whoever did this came back. His voice cracked with pain and warning. But Marcus didn't move. He knelt down in the dirt beside him, looked him dead in the eyes, and said the words that would later be repeated in newspapers across the state. "Don't be scared. I'll help you." It wasn't bravado. It was a promise, and Marcus Whitfield intended to keep it. He worked fast, small fingers fumbling at the padlocks, realizing quickly he had no way to break steel chains alone. So he did the only thing he could. He ran. He ran 2 miles into town without stopping, lungs burning, sneakers slapping pavement, until he reached the only motorcycle shop he knew, a place called Redline Cycle, owned by a woman named Dallas Marsh, who had once let him wash windows for spare change. He burst through her door gasping, barely able to form sentences, but he got the words out. "Bikers, chained feed store, hurry." Dallas didn't hesitate. She had ridden with clubs for 20 years before opening her shop, and she knew exactly what chained men behind an abandoned building meant. She grabbed bolt cutters, called the police, and then did something no one expected. She picked up her radio and put out a call on the open frequency used by riders across 3 counties, a call reserved for only the direst emergencies. Brothers down, location given, all riders respond. What happened over the next 4 hours became the stuff of local legend. Word spread from clubhouse to clubhouse, town to town, until the roads leading into that small town filled with the thunder of engines. Riders came from over 100 miles away, men and women, young and old, from a dozen different clubs, who had long histories of rivalry and even hatred toward one another. But none of that mattered once the word "Brothers Down" hit the radio waves. By midday, an estimated 2,000 bikers had descended on that town, engines roaring like a mechanical storm, all of them searching for 4 chained men and the boy who had refused to look away. Marcus stood in the middle of it all, small and stunned, as leather-clad strangers thanked him, wept in front of him, some even kneeling to shake his hand like he was something sacred. Tobias Reed, once freed and treated by paramedics, refused to leave until he found the boy. When he did, he didn't say thank you. He simply wrapped Marcus in a hug so tight the boy could feel the man's heart hammering, still terrified from what he'd survived, still disbelieving that a child had saved his life. The police, aided by the overwhelming presence of riders combing every road and alley, caught 3 members of the Ashfield Reapers before nightfall. The 4th surrendered the next morning after realizing There was nowhere left to run, not with 2,000 bikers patrolling every route out of town. In the days that followed, Marcus became something the town hadn't expected, a symbol. Not of violence, not of danger, but of the exact opposite, of the belief that courage doesn't come from size or strength, but from the willingness to act when everyone else looks away. The Iron Wolves Motorcycle Club moved beyond words, held a ceremony in the very field where Marcus had once collected cans, and they gave him something no 11-year-old boy had ever received: an honorary vest stitched with his name, and a promise that as long as the club existed, Marcus Whitfield and his grandmother would never be without help again. But it was what Tobias Reed said at that ceremony that brought grown men to tears. He told the crowd that he had ridden for 23 years, buried more brothers than he could count, and believed he had seen every kind of courage the road could offer. But nothing, he said, had ever humbled him like the sight of a small boy walking toward danger. Instead of away from it, kneeling in the dirt beside 4 broken strangers, and promising them they would not be forgotten. Marcus's grandmother, a soft-spoken woman named Odessa, Whitfield, who had raised him alone since he was 3, stood at the edge of that ceremony with tears streaming down her face. She had taught her grandson that kindness was never wasted, that helping someone in their lowest moment could change the direction of their entire life. She never imagined her lessons would one day save 4 men and bring 2,000 strangers together in gratitude for a boy who simply refused to be scared. If this story touched your heart even a little, if it reminded you that kindness can move mountains and that a child's courage can shake an entire town awake, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, and share it with someone who needs a reminder that good still exists in this world. Before we reach the end of this journey, we have a small tradition here on Whispering Tales Stories. Comment the word courage if you believe that even the smallest act of bravery can change everything. Months later, on quiet afternoons, Marcus could still be found collecting cans along the same roads, still wearing his honorary vest a little too big for his shoulders. But now, when the sound of engines rolled through town, he no longer felt fear. He felt something steadier, the quiet knowledge that somewhere out there, 2,000 riders considered him family, and that the 4 chained men he once knelt beside in the dirt would spend the rest of their lives grateful that a boy chose kindness over fear, and turned a moment of terror into a story of unbreakable brotherhood.